Hello everyone and welcome. So the winter is slowly coming to an end, well, hopefully, but I still wanted to make a card with a winter landscape. This is a very simple painting, you do not need many supplies, and it's definitely perfect for beginners. These are the paints I'm going to be using. I have here 3 shades of blues. You don't need so many, one is enough, and you can always mix colors together. And I also have a yellow, pink, black, and brown paints. I taped my cardstock onto a board using washi. This is the Canson XL watercolor paper and I cut it down to slightly smaller than A6 so I can easily adhere it onto a card base. I started painting the sky. For that I did the wet on wet technique. I used a flat brush to apply clear water across the panel and then I used a paint with the lightest blue and a little bit of yellow below it. All I wanted is to create a very pale blue sky with hints of yellow. I applied the paint only at the top third of the panel. I stopped around the spot where the lowest point of the mountain will be. On my trail card, I covered the top half with the paint and the hills were slightly yellow. It did not look bad, but this time I wanted to avoid it. Next, I painted the mountains just in the back. I made another card in the past where I painted a few rows of mountains. I will leave the link to that video in the description. And here I followed the same method, except I did not add too much of color as these are supposed to be snowy mountains. With my brush, I quickly painted the outline of the mountains with very diluted light blue. I added a little bit more of the blue at the top, but then I cleaned my brush and then with a damp brush I evened out the color. I did not add any additional color, I brought the color from the top of the mountain to the bottom, softening it out because I wanted the majority of the ground to be white and the blue is to add a definition and create shadows. My original idea on this card only contained the sky and the tree without the leaves in front, so everything else is optional or you can mix and match. For example, as I was painting, I wanted to also add few small hills in the front. So I used a smaller brush, I dipped it in the paint and with the tip of the brush I painted the lines to create the top of the hills. Especially I wanted to have a small hill on the left side and then I also created another hill on the right side. And then with a clean brush I softened the paint like I did with the mountains. I let the piece dry and this is important, I let the panel dry after each step. And when it was dry, on top of the hill I painted 3 pine trees. I have the feeling I painted the trees a little bit too small, let me know what you think. As the hill is quite close to the front, I think they should be slightly bigger. But in the end it doesn't really matter, I think it still looks good. Also, I like when the ground below the trees is darker and like it blends with the ground. The best way to achieve this is with the wet on wet technique where only the ground is wet. Since I let the piece dry so I can paint the trees, I had to add water to the ground. You can do this before you paint the trees or like me here while painting them. I applied clean water below the trees, slightly touching the tree which activates the paint so the color spreads out a little bit. And because I didn't want to have a weird dried spots of color, I used a clean wet brush to spread the color from where the small hill starts, going towards the bottom. Next, I painted the tree without leaves. You can also paint a pine tree if that's easier for you, or you can also leave it out and paint the other things. As I said, you can mix and match, it's all up to you. You can paint the tree right away. For me, that is way too scary, so I created this sketch onto a printer paper so I can transfer the image on the watercolor background. And I scribbled the graphite of the pencil covering the whole tree on the other side. Then I flipped it over, I placed it onto the watercolor panel, and with my pencil I went over the lines, which transferred the graphite on the back onto the watercolor paper. Well, sort of, I could not really see the lines at all. So I used a pencil and added some branches afterwards. Actually, normally you sketch your images at the beginning before you start watercoloring. At least that's what I saw other watercolor artists are doing, but I forgot. Next, using a mixture of mainly brown and a little bit of black, I painted the tree. I used a smaller brush so I can easily paint the branches. I also did the thing at the bottom of the tree where I added clean water so it looks smoother. First, I used the brown of the tree and then I added blue, but by mistake I added a little bit too much of blue, so I had to create another small hill, but I think it looks quite nice. I let the piece dry and then I painted grass and berries at the bottom. Again, this is optional. I first painted the berries. I used the top of the brush and created simple dots about 1 centimeter from the bottom of the panel. Then I let it fully dry. This is important as you don't want the red and the blue of the grass to be mixing. To paint the grass, I used a long bristle brush in the size 2. I bought it last year exactly for the purpose to paint grass and other thin lines, and so far I really like it. When I use a round brush, I never can hold my hand steady and the painting looks horrible. With this brush, I just did short strokes along the bottom, very easy. If you don't have this brush, you can skip the berries and the grass. As I said, this is optional. You can also try it with a round brush or perhaps do blotches with your brush to create bushes. And by the way, the product list you will find over on my website. The link is in the description. I adhered the panel on top of a card base that I made using a craft cardstock. If you don't make your own card bases, you can buy these pre-made. And lastly, I adhered a banner with a greeting that I pre-made. It says happy birthday and I stamped it and heat embossed it with a white embossing powder. If you don't have stamps, you can write the sentiment by hand or leave it out. The greeting is also optional. So the card is done. I hope you like it and will try painting something similar. Believe me, it's very simple. I was actually postponing painting this card because I thought it was difficult, and then I was surprised how easy it was. If you would like to paint another landscape, you can check out the video on the top where I painted multiple mountains, or check out the playlist at the bottom with all the cards that I painted from scratch. All are perfect for beginners. Thank you all so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you in my next video.